Whether you're ordering wings for the game, whipping up a 7-layer dip, or ordering pizza, there's something about football that makes you want to eat. And this football season, Uber Eats has the best deals on game day food. No matter what you're craving, from 2-for-1 pizza to buy one, get one wings, Uber Eats will be dropping new deals each week, all season long. Uber Eats, official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the Vehicle Owner's Manual for important feature limitations and information.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. It's time to remember this crap with Mike Donahue. Mike, how are you?
Pretty stoked, Andy. Cubs are 10 days into the season and still have not been under 500. That's a feather in our cap.
Not until tomorrow.
Oh, come on. Pirates come to town.
Yeah.
Stretch this out a little longer.
Oh, I don't think you knew this. On the recording this on Wednesday night, and the Cubs... they're in a rain delay with the Rays. I don't think they're ever going to resume the game.
Nope.
Lose. Boog Shambi, during the telecast, was talking about how the 1982 Cubs only used 15 pitchers in the entire season.
I saw that.
And there's no way he knew that other than the fact that he clearly listens to Remember This Crap. We talked about it like 3 weeks ago. So,
well, my
Boog.
thought... Right,
Thank you, credit us next time you use one of our facts on the air. Would be nice.
Well, my thought was that it was some PA that dug that up who also listens to the show, but then he covered his tracks because the point we made up. Oh, you would have brought that up in 82 because the first time you brought it up was we did 1980 a few weeks earlier. That was even more stark. That was 12, and that was one under the 13. It was topical because of Scott Service complaining. But it's almost something we should probably check every time we do an 80s now because it is kind of hilarious to compare. But you did when we did 82 a few weeks ago. We probably even did it for 86. You tallied up the number of starters. So yeah, it was funny to see something like that appear on the broadcast tonight.
Well, I mean, when we were kids, pitching staffs were always 10 guys.
Yeah. Like at any given time,
it was like a big deal if a team had an 11th pitcher.
11th, yeah.
And now
it must be a doubleheader.
Morons think they need like 20 of them.
I know.
And they still, Stroman was struggling today, and they're like, well, he's probably going to need some more innings out of him. His bullpen is taxed. So he's got 14 guys down. Really?
Yeah, and also that's when eating it means like giving up 5 runs in 5 innings.
I don't know if you saw Dallas Keuchel in Game 1 of the White Sox doubleheader today. But
I heard the White Sox got blown out.
He didn't make it out of the second inning, and Tony let him wear 10 runs.
Wow.
10 earned runs. Tim Anderson made 3 errors and flipped off the crowd. So
did he really? Literally?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good.
The Guardian crowd?
Good day for the Sox. The Sox got swept in a doubleheader, and their all-star
Timmy
gave the crowd finger.
I confess to enjoying watching him play. I wish he didn't play for the Sox. I'm disappointed that he would let those morons get to him, but whatever.
I think it's weird that Jason Benetti, like during action, simply refers to him as Tim.
Not TA?
Well,
or just he never calls him Tim Anderson, you mean?
No, he just said, there's a ground ball to Tim.
Oh.
And you're like, no, that's some names. Like if it's Javi, that's different for some reason. Like Tim. Like, how about Anderson? Really? It just doesn't sound right. I mean, one of the most annoying examples of that is my good friend Bill Simmons. For some reason, whenever he talks about Chris Paul, just calls him Chris, as if they are best friends.
That's really.
And it's like, okay, there's a million fucking Chris's.
Right.
Just use his name so we know who you're talking about, Mr. Familiar. But
I would still be inclined to think of Chris Tucker before Chris Paul. But maybe I'm dated. But that's an incredibly common name.
It's different. It's like, really if you're Seiya Suzuki, you can call you Seiya. That's right. Probably fine. But
yeah.
It's
even
weird
Javi.
to just hear a super common one-syllable first name. It's like, that just seems strange.
Well, Jason Benetti, they say he's one of the best and the brightest.
I like him. I think he's good. I mean, I don't, and I have to admit, I will never
game.
hear him actually doing a full Sox game because I won't watch one. I only hear it on like clips. So
yeah,
he rarely does it, and I just catch it all the time.
He calls a good game.
I have zero interest in that team, so
they're not a bad team.
No, they're not. I guess.
And they're fun to watch. Yeah, I got two. Yeah, I think we both have too much baggage. But I will say Benetti calls a good game. No Zach Zaidman, but then again, who is? So.
Okay, so anyway, we are about to spin the wheel of crap. See what we land on. Last week was the
86.
Oh yeah,
86.
Right.
It was the word.
Another 86 Cubs.
Ed Lynch, number 37. Yeah, we have, as predicted, as well as the law of averages would dictate, we've finally are diving into the decade of the 80s. 3 out of the last 4 have all taken place. Still plenty more of that came from kids.
Yeah, well, it's going to be tough. We can do it, but it's going to be tough to hit the 80s because 2 of the 80s that are still on the wheel are off limits this week. Can't do 85 or 87.
Yep.
So that leaves 81, 83, and 88. Oh, 87. Oof. No, can't do 87. 88.
Well, yeah, we haven't done 84 either.
Oh, and 84. That's right. The big. That's like the last big one that we have.
Yeah. Hoping that one holds out for a little bit, for a long summer night, maybe.
All right. I'm going to share this so everybody can hear the sound effect. They wouldn't want to miss that.
I can't see it either, but maybe that's a new wrinkle.
No,
just surprise me.
There it is. I hadn't shared it.
What sayeth thou, wheel? Okay.
All right. So, 5 quick things about 1981?
Unlike parts of the 79 and 80 season, this would be an entire full season in which the Cubs were managed by Joey Amalfitano, somehow shaking off the interim label. I'll say that 81 was the other year in the 80s in which the Cubs failed to have a pitcher win 10 games. But of course, that's fact 2. But of course, fact 3 was the season itself was broken down into I guess 2 halves in what amounted to about a 110 game schedule. So Cubs probably wouldn't have been the only team that didn't fail to win 10 games. It was the first year of my favorite Cub, Leon Durham, having been dealt for Bruce Sutter. And it was the last year in which the Cubs were owned by the Wrigley family, which would be an ownership that would have lasted, I would say off the top of my head, about 60 some odd years. And 5 pennants, but none for the previous 36 seasons. Really was a season that for years until 1994, really, I felt it was the worst individual season in my lifetime. Although I will say that having done this, perhaps I didn't appreciate how god-awful 1980 was, the preceding year. But you know, we've got 2 back-to-back seasons. My first 2 seasons really as a Cubs fan. And if that didn't deter me, nothing would. But there wasn't a whole lot of sunshine in 1981.
The 81 Cubs only played 103 games. Is that right? 38 and 65. Is that 103? 95
that would be
5 and 8.
It is
103 games.
So they missed 2 months.
They got off to a tremendous start. Red hot, you might say. They were 1-10. They got to 3-17. They finally won their 10th game. It was almost June. Saturday, May 30th, they were 10-32. So much like the 1994, I remember the 94 Cubs. I remember actively rooting for the strike just to make it all end. I'm sure I would have. The 8-year-old me was probably Well, no, I
That's
wasn't doing that. I didn't care. I just wanted him to
no,
play.
it was sad and weird and not to have baseball that summer. Didn't matter how shitty the Cubs were, but honestly, you're right. I didn't even draw that comparison to 94 because they were both truncated seasons, but in fact, they were seasons. If ever you were to wish for a season to be truncated as a Cubs fan, those are 2 seasons right there. But again, yeah, we're kids though, and it was odd. I think we were, you and I were probably both playing Little League baseball. We're into it. Like I said, I'm following this team by hook or by crook. Doesn't matter how that Jerry Martin's leading the team the year before with like 23 homers and any magic from 79 was gone. Like, no, I'm on this, but so it was sad not to see the Cubs. It was exciting when they came back. I remember they played the Mets in the first game back. I think Mike Scott was pitching for the Mets. I think my dad was off of work. Went to the water park and the Cubs were on and all was good again. And it was also kind of funny because they were so god awful. But what they decided, this was like a 45-day interruption, maybe. It had about 2 months probably because they played 103 games. They missed 60. They missed about 2 months of the schedule. But the solution in order to proceed within the season, because, they played, unlike 94, which happened in August and just wiped out the end of the season, this strike occurred in June. So there was this collection of games, and then they go to the bargaining table, and Marvin Miller and, Bowie Kuhn are going back and forth. And when it finally got resolved, one of the practical solutions was to start over, crown as champion all of the division leaders who were leading their division at the time of the strike, and they would automatically enter a makeshift divisional round of the playoffs in October. They're already in the playoffs, but now we're starting fresh, and here we are in early August, and we're going to have another, not quite the same number of games, but another sort of a half season, and off we go. So the joke was, hey, as shitty as the Cubs were in the first half, we can still make the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah, the Cubs played on June 11th and then not again until August 10th. So it's so just short of 2 months. The best part of the 2-half thing was the team that it's completely screwed. The St. Louis Cardinals had the best overall record in the National League East. They were 59-43 for the season, 2 games ahead of the Expos. Unfortunately for the Cardinals, they finished in second place in both halves and did not make the playoffs. They finished a game and a half behind the Phillies in the first half and a half game behind the Expos in the second. And they didn't bother to make up a half game. And they did not go to the playoffs, so screw them.
Well, tough break there, Mike Shannon and the rest of yous. That's a fun fest. So hey, that's another good reason, right? Kind of like in '94, where the White Sox seem poised to make a legitimate run at a pennant in 1994, only to have their own owner help conspire to pull the rug out from under them. But
yeah, that would have been the 80 Cardinals were. A lot of the 82 Cardinals, obviously. Darryl Porter, Keith Hernandez, Tom Herr. Gary Templeton was still at short. Ozzie Smith was in San Diego. Ken Oberkfell. Sixto Lozano was playing for him.
Ozzie's first year was 81. Is that what you're saying then? He was not on the 1980 Cardinals?
He was on the 80 Cardinals.
All right. So he'd be in 81, and then
it
sounds about right.
Cardinals.
He did? So Ozzie's first year they won it all?
Yeah, 81. Why was I saying 80? Yeah, the 81 Cardinals. So that they made the move after that, I guess. So after the strike season, they swapped shortstops.
So
and then
Ozzie won a World Series in his first year with the Cardinals.
Yeah, great.
So wait, I cut out for a sec. Ozzie was acquired for Templeton after the 82 season. Ozzie won.
Well, it makes sense.
Ozzie won a World Series in his first year with the Cardinals. I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay.
Let's see. Was there anybody else in that trade?
Well, and Oberkfell used to be their second baseman, and they moved him to third, I think, when they got rid of the great Ken Reitz, and Tommy Herr got called up. So
it was
Ozzie was just the missing piece.
December 10th, 1981. Gary Templeton and Sixto Lezcano and a player name later to the Padres for Steve Mura, Ozzie Smith, and a player named later. Al Olmstead was the player named later that the Cardinals got, and Luis De Leon was the player named later that the
not to
Padres
be confused
got.
with Jose De Leon. Luis was another pitcher in the National League around the same time.
He was a reliever.
I feel like the Cardinals and Padres.
pounds.
Yeah, he was small.
So you would not confuse him with Jose. He was not small.
Ozzie got the better end of that deal. So that was after 81. So in 81, Whitey Herzog leads a team that has the best record in the NL East and doesn't get to go to the playoffs. So they get screwed. But it didn't matter for the Cubs. The Cubs were in disarray. We've covered it pretty well in 1980 that after the 6 decades of ownership, they were completely checked out. You know, you had like 3 phases of Wrigley ownership. The first phase, William Wrigley Jr., who, you know, really kind of built the gum company and loved baseball and like hired the right people and like was the 4 pennant winners between 29 and 38. And he dies suddenly right towards the end of that. And then his hand-picked general manager, Bill Veeck Sr., dies shortly after that. So this thing that they had built was sort of in flux. And as the fates would have it, William Wrigley Jr.'s son, PK, was just an oddball, enigmatic, not interested in baseball so much. He was interested in Wrigley Field. He did help maintain the park, God bless him. He put all the games on all the channels in Chicago. He did things that inadvertently helped the Cubs brand, but they never applied any meaningful resources, but for a brief period in the 60s when they cultivated Lou Brock and Ron Santo and Billy Williams and actually had a brief, bright period that still ended in bitter failure. And then PK Wrigley finally, after 3 decades of odd management, passes away, and his son's even less interested. And then his widow dies, and he was just burdened by the whole inheritance tax. And meanwhile, it's an absolute shit show on the field. And they lose 98 games in 1980 and 81. They just decide. Joey Amalfitano replaced Herman Franks late in 79, and then he was like the perennial third base interim manager guy, and he goes right back to third base when they hire Preston Gomez, and then after they fire Preston right away, they give the interim job back to Joey, and then they were so disinterested that coming into this 81 season, they were just like, just let Joey manage the team. We're checked out.
Maybe nobody else wanted it. They offered it around.
Absolutely.
I got a guy on another line about some white walls.
I really don't think that the franchise itself ever has had such a nadir as it did at the end of the 1981 season, just from every angle, like on the team, in the front office, in ownership, with the ballpark was crumbling, the neighborhood was shit. It was, it would be hard to imagine as unusual and frustrating as a trajectory has been since 1981 to have actually mapped it out ahead of time, because they were kind of a dead franchise, frankly.
What you're saying is 1981 was like, you had to be a moron if that was the year you decided to become a Cubs fan. Is that what you're saying?
It takes a few to raise this fan base,
If you were 8 years old and that was the year you went to your first game. You
made
a horrible life decision at 8, and one that you'll never be able to. It's a hair shirt.
Like I said, I'm just literally 1 year older than you. 1980 was my first full season, and they were just as bad. And again, though, I was a little bit younger, so in my head, I've always felt 81 was worse. Probably because that false hope of that second start of the season, because it was like, oh my God, this team is terrible. Oh, there's no baseball. Oh, they're coming back. Hey, maybe they can make the playoffs after all.
Well,
they still suck.
So in the first half, the time of the strike, they had the worst record in baseball. They were 15-37. That's a .288 winning percentage.
After almost 2 months.
That's 62 Mets territory.
That's a 100 loss trajectory. Easily.
But in the second half, they were red hot. They were much better. They were 23-28. They were only 5 under, and they finished 6th in the first half, and they rocketed all the way to 5th in the second half, the Pirates bottomed out.
Okay.
And, the Pirates went.
Pirates just 2 years removed from a world championship. Yeah. That's right, kids.
The Pirates were
Pittsburgh
25-23 before the strike, 5.5 games out of first. And they
yep.
went 21-33 in the second half, 9.5 games out of first. So
I think Willie Stargell was still playing, and he was really old.
They didn't come back from the strike.
No.
In fact, the surge that the Cubs had in the second half meant that they only had the second worst record in baseball at the end of the season. The Toronto Blue Jays were worse. The Cubs had a .369 winning percentage. The Blue Jays had a .349 winning percentage. And as you may recall, in 1982, the Cubs had the first overall pick in the draft. And the reason for that is the most baseball thing ever. Because the leagues were still treated as separate, they alternated.
Yep. So
that was the National League's turn in 1982 to pick first.
Right.
So the Cubs had the first pick. The Blue Jays, who had a worse record, had the second pick instead. So the Cubs took Sean Dunston, and the Blue Jays took Augie Schmidt from the University of New Orleans.
Which we brought that up, certainly, because we always seem to cover drafts. We brought that up in 82. So I actually didn't know that the Cubs – I did know that there was that oddball rule because they had the same thing for playoffs and World Series for years.
And hosting the All-Star game. They alternated that every year, too.
Right. Okay. So that I was aware of. I didn't know that 81 fell on a year that it was going to be the National League. I just assumed the Cubs did, in fact, have the worst record in baseball because they were so bad. And I'm also a little bit stupefied by the fact that as awful as this team has been for years and years, that I do think there was one season since then, Andy, maybe, where the Cubs did have the worst record in baseball, but it fell on the American League year. Yeah. And they didn't get the pick. Did they have a second pick? Well, we could probably call who there's.
Was that the year they had to pick David Greenwood instead of Magic Johnson?
No, actually, I right. Thank you. I know that's bullshit because I don't think offhand the Cubs have ever had the second pick in the draft. I think Pryor was a third. Luis Montañez might have been a third. Patterson was maybe a third, but I don't know if we ever had a second so scratch that. But you're right.
By that time, it was they weren't alternating anymore. I don't know when.
I thought it was more recently. I thought it was more recently than even
when interleague came in, because that would have been 94.
Well, that was 97, but Pryor was drafted in 01,
right.
And
I don't think they were. I think he had to earn it on the field.
Okay, amazingly the Cubs haven't.
2 years later, it would really burn the Seattle Mariners because they ended up with the worst record in baseball, but the Mets got to pick first, and the Mets took the immortal Sean Abner from Mechanicsburg High School, and the Mariners had to settle for Bill Swift, University of Maine. The Cubs picked third, and they took Drew Hall. Remember Drew Hall?
This 84?
Yeah.
Hey, Bill Swift was a 20-game winner on Dusty's first Giants team in '93 with John Burkett when they won 103 games.
Players picked after the Cubs picked Drew Hall include
Greg Maddux. Corey Snyder. Wait.
The Cubs, but the Cubs, they at least got him.
I'm sorry. I'm right. I'm sorry.
No, I'm talking about guys the Cubs could have picked
in that '84 draft.
Yeah. Corey Snyder, Eric Pappas, who did pitch for the Cubs.
We talked about him.
Jay Bell.
He caught for the Cubs, I think.
Mark McGuire. Shane Mack. Oddibe McDowell. I loved Oddibe McDowell just because his name was Oddibe.
Trying to commit these.
Terry Mulholland. Went 24th
84 draft. I'm trying to commit as many of these as I can in memory for when we do 84.
Yeah, there's Norm Charlton, 28th to the Expos.
Nasty boy.
Greg Maddux, 31st to the Cubs.
Pretty good draft.
Yeah. Tom Glavine, 47th to the Barbs. Marvin Freeman. There was a game where Marvin Freeman and Kevin Foster both started against each other, and they homered off each other.
Wow.
All right. I don't know what we're talking about, the 84 draft.
Well, I guess, you can round it up because the one draft we haven't talked about was 81. I want to say, was that Joe Carter? Or was Joe Carter drafted in 1980? Since we're in the 81 season.
That was the Cubs' second-round pick again. They had the second pick. And it was Joe Carter.
1981? It was. All right.
So that would have meant that they should have had
The first pick?
They should have had the first pick. It was Mike Moore of the Mariners, so that didn't.
Who had a serviceable big league career.
The White Sox had the 7th pick. They took Darryl Boston.
I remember Darryl Boston.
Everybody remembers Darryl Boston. Dick Schofield went 3rd. Matt Williams, drafted by the. That can't be the same Matt Williams.
He went, or he already went to college. Or wait, not if he's a first round.
It's a different guy. This was a pitcher named Matt Williams.
Okay.
Ron Darling.
Okay. Went to Harvard. Or Yale.
Steve Lyons went 19th to the Red Sox.
Psycho. Played every position.
Cubs in the second round took Darren Jackson.
Okay. In 81. So he was not a Dallas Green pick. I have to correct myself. I had suggested in a previous podcast that Darren Jackson was yet another, at least mediocre major leaguer that Dallas Green had at least.
There was a nice little run here in the second round of Mike Gallego, Mark Gubiza, Mark Langston, and then some guy named Kevin Torvey, and then Frank Viola.
Wow,
that's 3 pretty good starting pitchers in 4.
There's some Hall of very good there. Viola and Langston were 2 contemporary excellent American League pitchers.
The 58th pick, the 3rd round, the San Diego Padres took Tony Gwynn.
Yeah, how about that? Out of San Diego State.
So the Cubs passed him 3 times. Good job. Oh, we thought he was going to play basketball.
Yeah.
Dave,
really?
This is good. Dave Cohn went in the 3rd round of the Royals. He wasn't even David. He was just call me Dave.
The Royals, you said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they gave up on him. That was to the Mets' benefit.
There's a Doug Davis, but it's not the Doug Davis that.
It could have been though.
This was an outfield.
I know, but okay. I'm saying because those soft tossing lefties can't last forever. It seems.
Mickey Tettleton went in the 5th round to the A's.
Cheerio, or what was his Fruit Loops? Was that his nickname?
Yeah, that's right. Because that's what he ate all the time, right?
Something like that.
He had that fucked up batting stance.
He also had a son who played against NIU in the MAC championship game. He was the quarterback. I want to say for would be maybe Kent State. Could be wrong there, but Mickey Tettleton's kid. So there's the
125th pick in the 5th round, 125th pick, John Franco by the Dodgers. Does that mean he went back to? Did he ever get traded to the Mets or the Reds?
He came up with the Reds.
Yeah, maybe he must have gone back for his senior year at St. John's. Let's see.
Yeah, he was traded for Randy Myers, I think. Our guy, Randy Myers. He may have been drafted in 81 because Norm Charlton was. He got almost all the nasty boys.
No, we haven't heard Rob Dibbles. He got traded to the Reds.
Okay.
Let's see. That's about it. For Mike Pagliarulo in the 6th round.
Pags.
Brian Clutterbuck, the Brewers in the 7th round.
I vaguely remember that name, only because of the name.
Hey, Mark McGwire got drafted in this draft, too. 8th round by the Expos. He was listed as a pitcher first baseman from Laverne, California, before he went to.
And he went to Southern Cal instead, and then got drafted. Oh, he was drafted out of Southern Cal by the Expos. No, he was still went to college because he was on the '84 Olympics. He got a top space for.
Yeah, I didn't say he went.
Sorry,
he got drafted and then went back.
Didn't mean to jump all over you there.
Marvin Freeman got drafted again too. I forgot he went to Chicago Vocational.
But so Kevin Foster, all right. So Marvin Freeman and Kevin Foster are both Chicago guys because Kevin Foster's dad was a CTA bus driver.
Yeah,
so the oddity of 2 African American pitchers homering off each other, both hailing from Chicago. Somebody called Bill James. Yeah. That's got to be the odds of that.
Okay, and the last one here, 9th round, 233rd pick. New York Yankees took first baseman Fred McGriff.
Wow. That's a good pick. I mean, as much as I loathe Fred McGriff and his time with the Cubs, he could hit the ball when he was interested.
I wonder who they traded him for. This is when
the Yankees kept stepping on their own dick.
Well, Steinbrenner would, fixate on a veteran, and he wouldn't give a shit which prospects he bullied his general manager into trading.
Gene Michael, the aforementioned Gene Michael. It's at times, right?
He got traded a year later with Dave Collins, Mike Morgan, and cash to the Blue Jays for Tom Dodd and Dale Murray.
I remember Dale Murray, not Dale Murphy. Dale Murray. I just remember from this Topps card. He and Barry Bonnell, just two nondescript white Blue Jays.
Yeah, he was just a middle reliever. Oof.
Yeah.
What an awful
Blue Jays were bad. Cubs were bad. Both would turn it around, though, because Cubs would rocket to the Division 84, and the Blue Jays started to put together a run. Blue Jays were a pretty woeful franchise. They expanded. Blue Jays and the Mariners were kind of like bad. This is back in the day when expansion teams really were supposed to suck for a while. So, and they did. But here in 1981, here's a 105-year-old franchise that is absolutely slumming with the likes of these, 6-year franchises. Didn't really have much. Also, 81 would be also, I didn't mention this in my facts because I only have 5, but Rick Reuschel, our longtime favorite, he would end his streak of opening days in 81. It'd be his last one because he would get dealt. Our guy. So it was really a remodeling. Bob Kennedy was the general manager coming into the season. Tribune ownership, William Wrigley III is checking out. Even if you vaguely remember the 79 Cubs and like Dave Kingman and Barry Foote, the only guys left are like Buckner. Buckner's still around. Jesus was still around in 81. They were the only things worth rooting for in a shitty team anyway. And but Reuschel was another one of those guys, and it was like, all right, well, the guy has labored for some mediocre to shitty teams here for about 5-6 years, or open day starter for probably 5 or 6 years. Let's give him a chance to win a World Series. And so he got dealt. It may have been Herman, because another thing that happened amidst like the whole, Wrigley family sold the team, I think, during the strike. And it was huge news. Tribune Company buys the Chicago Tribune, which, we thought of as a newspaper. They buy the team. And somewhere around there, I don't know if Tribune did this, but Bob Kennedy was forced out or fired. And then it was like, okay, let's have Herman Franks, this rotund, bellicose 70-year-old field manager from 2 years ago that, helped steal signals in the Bobby Thompson game in 51. Yeah, let's just make him our general manager. What skills does Herman Franks has as a general manager? I don't know. I just felt it was it's convenient. Let's hire. So something tells me that Bob Kennedy walked away, probably saw the writing on the wall, probably figured, because Bob Kennedy was a somewhat respected baseball lifer, former player, former Cub College of Coach guy. His son was a major league catcher for a good decade. Maybe he saw the writing on the wall. I'm out of here. And William Wrigley's like, what happened to that guy who used to stand naked in the food buffet after games, according to Bob Verdi? Let's make him the general manager while we finish the sale to the Tribune. So I don't know who it was that dealt Rick Reuschel, but we were happy for the Whale because he would go to the Yankees, who oddly enough, this would be the Yankees' only World Series appearance between 1978 and 1996, which, but for today, would represent one of the more disgraceful droughts since 1920 for that franchise. But yeah, long and the short of it is too late. But Rick Reuschel was dealt, and somehow Herman Franks was back as the Cubs general manager in 81.
So,
and he may have dealt his former ace.
Reuschel got traded for the 1982
opening day starter. Mm-hmm.
Doug Bird.
And I didn't mention this about Doug Bird. I don't know if you can look it up. You probably can through his game log. He was like a weird, like middle reliever, spot starter for the Royals and Yankees from the late 70s to early 80s. And he went through this weird streak where either he wasn't pitching a lot or he was injured. And he had some odd consecutive appearances streak where he didn't give up a run. I can't quite quantify it, but I know it stretched like 2 years, only because he didn't always pitch. But then he was kind of effective for a while. I want to say maybe even the White Sox broke it up, and here he was the White Sox announcer. So he seemed like maybe he's a good pitcher. I don't know. And he was the Cubs open day starter, and he was the best the Cubs got for Reuschel. But, yeah, Doug Bird at one point was on the scene for some oddball record that he kind of held.
So
I don't know if you can find that.
Reuschel went to the Yankees, and he made, in midseason, and he made 12 starts, 12 appearances, 11 starts for the Yankees. He threw 3 complete games. He was 4-4 with a 2.67 ERA. Pitched
his ass off. He did.
And he
I didn't know that.
Clearly got hurt, right?
Yes, he blew his arm out.
Yeah,
did he pitch in the series?
He did not pitch in the. Not only did he not pitch in the playoffs, he did not pitch in 1982, and he was back in '83 for the Cubs.
Yes, came crawling back.
Win-win there. Got him right back.
Good. And Doug Bird was probably
so
out
they
of
could
baseball.
Give him up again before he would before he would be good.
Here, real quick, then, I since I brought it up, I don't want to leave any loose ends. Here's some Doug Bird facts from Wikipedia. During his career, Bird was used in a variety of pitching roles, frequently shifting from the bullpen to the starting rotation. So my foggy memory was somewhat correct. And back, Bird appeared in 6 postseason games from 1976 through 78, all with the Royals, and each time against the New York Yankees, posting a 2.35 ERA. That's not what I was looking for. Bird, now he's most known for surrendering a 2-run homer to Thurman Munson in the 8th inning of Game 3. Apparently, this oddball stat that had all the sports wags raving in 1980 is not really. It's been lost to the sands of time. If Wikipedia doesn't have it, or maybe I can find it still and add it. Put my wiki editor hat on. It was some odd thing. But back to Reuschel.
Well, this seems really Cub. So he pitches for
off.
The Cubs in 81. They trade him to the Yankees. He pitches well but gets hurt. He comes back and he pitches 83 and 84 for the Cubs. But only pitches 23 games. 6-6 with a 4.94 ERA. The Cubs are like, all right, 84. You're done.
Yep.
And the next year,
gave up for nothing the second time.
Goes to Pittsburgh, and his first season with the Pirates goes 14-8 with a 2.27 ERA.
But what was that first season? Was it 85 or 86?
85.
So he rehabbed on the Cubs' dime.
Right. And had the Cubs kept him around, that was a year when they needed every one of their starters got hurt. And the guy they just gave away won 14 games for the Pirates.
We've talked about Dallas Green, how much we love. Although I'm not hesitant to point out any chinks in his armor. I think he held on to the '84 Cubs a year too long, obviously, and it helped accelerate. We found that out when we
thought they were going to trade them all, and they all stuck around.
In my memory, Matthews and Say gave their swan songs in '86, but no, they actually stuck around. Another year until '87. But I do remember at the time. As much as we loved the breath of fresh air that Dallas Green brought, I remember my dad sort of bristling sometimes at even he would sometimes bristle at, Green's reliance on his Philly connection. And for some reason, Warren Brewster drove my dad nuts. And we always felt like Reuschel, he pitched well. He okay in '84, but he was left off the playoff roster. He and Rich Bordy were two kind of ominous decisions in which, Brewster and maybe some other Philly washout was kept on, maybe Ruthven, I don't know. But I remember the feeling was that, all right, we appreciate what Dallas Green is doing, but boy, he really is unsentimental in the way he did bring Reuschel back and kind of stupidly let him rehab on the Cubs' dime, but he was left off the '84 playoff roster. He did contribute a little bit, and then they let him walk, and then after he was fully healed, because I think he was still kind of working back from that injury at the Cubs, helped him rehabilitate.
I can't imagine the Cubs looking at Rick Reuschel, that fine athletic specimen, and doubting that he could make it all the way back from arm surgery. Huh.
And the whole fitting end, of course, is that Reuschel, it's so Cub, of course, flash forward to 1989, and the Cubs are teetering anyway. The series was probably lost because of games 3 and 4, but and they did tag Reuschel for their only win in game 2, but basically Rick Reuschel there was on the hill pitching the Giants to a pennant over the Cubs in the deciding game 5 of the '89 NLCS. A good 8 years after the Cubs got rid of him the first time.
Yeah. So '83, when he was rehabbing, he made a stint pitching for the Quad City Cubs.
I love this story. You've told this before, but don't let that stop you, because it's a good one.
And they went to visit the Beloit Brewers, who were in their second season ever. '82 was the first year in Beloit, where they were led by Brad DeCry and Ty Van Berkeley-O and some other guy with a funky name who was a hitting coach for a long time. I can't think of who that was. So we went back. Dad wanted to go to a game when the Quad City Cubs were in town, and I'm like, sure. So we go there, and we got there early, And Big Daddy, Rick Reuschel, is doing a rehab stint for Quad City, which is why it turns out why Dad wanted to go. And so my dad is standing down by the visitors' dugout, and he's yelling at Rick Reuschel to come over. And I'm 11, and I'm embarrassed because Dad is yelling at this player who's clearly just going to blow him off. Rick comes by, Dad yells what his name is and the name of one of our neighbors, because Rick Reuschel has hunted on our neighbor's land, and so as soon as Rick hears that name, he comes right over.
Nice.
And him and Dad chatted up for a while, and I'm standing there, and he asks me. He signs my program. And then he asked me, I don't know why he asked me this, but he did. He goes, "Hey, is there anybody on the team that you want to get an autograph from?" And I'm like, "Yeah, can you get me Sean Dunstan's autograph?" And he's like, "I'll do better than that." And he disappears into the dugout. And like 2 minutes later, Sean Dunstan pops up with Rick Reuschel and says hi and signs
20-year-old Sean Dunstan.
Right. I'm,
10. You're half his
probably
age.
19-year-old. I'm like 8. We're 8 years difference is all. And I got Sean Dunstan's autograph in a program that I still have somewhere. The other thing I remember about that day was when we bought the program, the guy at the counter said, "Oh, here, take this one." He goes, "It's a winner." And Dad's like, "What?" And he opens it to a page in the thing. And there's
Derek Botello's signature?
No, even better. There's a Kentucky Fried Chicken ad in the program, and there's a stamp on it. He goes, during whatever inning, they're going to call out, check your program, and if you have the stamp, you win. It was like, you win like dinner at KFC or whatever.
KFC, baby.
So that program had Rick Reuschel's autograph, Sean Dunstan's autograph, and it was a winner at KFC. And what I remember is, a few days later, we drove back to Beloit, and we got KFC, and everybody in the house got sick.
I would think that maybe next time you could ask Rick Reuschel to spare a few of the pheasants he hunted on your dad's neighbor's lawn.
Rick, do you know if they're properly preparing the chicken?
I love that he was a hunter. He's a Quincy boy, Rick Reuschel. Same as, I believe, Jack Brickhouse and Elvin Tappy, who was a college of coaches. Quincy always had a little bit of a connection to Chicago, but and of course Paul Reuschel, another Quincy guy. But
Paul and Rick came out together. They were the ones farming on Bernie Walsh's land.
Excellent.
Another Chicago athlete who liked to hunt out by where I grew up was Mark Bortz. And I went to my friend Aaron's wedding, and we're sitting there, and I look over, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, that's Mark Bortz is at the wedding. This was long after he had retired from the Bears, and wasn't nearly, he didn't get Tom Thayer skinny, but he wasn't huge anymore. But I'm like, that's Mark Bortz. And we went and we sat at Mark Bortz's table for like 20 minutes and drank beer.
Nice.
And just talked about the Ditka era Bears with Mark Bortz.
That is awesome. I do always sort of associate Bortz with Thayer because they seem to have a similar build, but Bortz always seemed to have that more Neanderthalic forehead.
He's much bigger. Thayer's kind of squatty.
I know what Thayer's, yeah.
Bortz was not short. Bortz was tall for a guard.
Okay.
He's tall to me, and
probably still small.
He was taller than me.
Probably still small compared to Keith Van Horn. I only say that because Steve Dahl,
like 6'7".
Steve Dahl used to just say that Keith Van Horn was the most gigantic white man he'd ever met.
Oh yeah, Bortz 6'6".
Okay.
So yeah, that's really tall for a guard. Because I remember, I saw him across the. They got married outdoors somewhere, so I saw him. And I'm like, oh, that's Mark Bortz. And then later, as we made our way over to them, he just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger as I got closer. It's like, holy shit, this dude's huge. Well, now I know why. He's 4 inches taller than me.
So at some point during the 1981 season, Mark Bortz was probably doing some mini camp in Iowa City. Was he an Iowa guy, right?
Yeah,
he was Iowa. Yeah, he's a Midwestern guy. Hey, maybe now is a good time. When we do the early 80s and teams in which Bill Buckner played, we could play that game. How many strikeouts did Bill Buckner have in 1981? But you have to adjust it because it's only 103 games.
Oh, he might not have struck out 4 times.
Let me think. He probably played most of the games because, he had a nice long rest in the middle of the season. So I'm going to say that Bill Buckner in 1981 struck out 12 times.
Oh, you're way off. In 421 at-bats, 16 strikeouts.
Okay. So he had way more at-bats. He had way more at-bats than I was calculating.
311, 349, 480. It was a 130 OPS plus. 10 homers,
Holy
75 RBIs. 75 RBIs in 106 games.
For a shitty team.
Yeah.
He had a hell of a season. He came into the season, and we've discussed this, as the defending National League batting champion as well.
The primary second baseman on the 1981 Cubs. You know who it was?
Can I guess?
Yeah.
Opening day second baseman was Joe Strain, who was traded, I believe. Maybe we should pull up. I believe they played the Mets. I already said it was Rick Reuschel's last opening day. I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was against the Mets.
Oh, actually, he's not. I don't know why they listed him because. Okay, yeah. There's 3 guys who played second base. There's 4 guys.
I could be wrong, but
okay. There's 4 guys who played second base, but 3 of them played the most games. 2 of them are inextricably linked in Cub history.
I can nail them because I want to say Joe Strain was the opening day center fielder. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but he's got to be one of the 3. Am I wrong?
Joe Strain is, yes.
Good, because he was traded for the aforementioned in the previous podcast, Jesus Figueroa, who got my hopes up with a basket home run for his only career home run. But then he was down. Yeah, sure. Joe Strain actually went 2 for 3 on opening day. So hopes are high, but he was terrible. Junior Kennedy, I'm sure, was an 81 Cub. And then, of course, the white Mike Tyson. Are those our 3 second basemen?
No. Mike Tyson, yes. The guy who Baseball Reference listed as the second baseman was Pat Tabler.
Oh.
But he played fewer games than both. Then he played more games than Strain, fewer games than Tyson.
And what about Junior Kennedy? What about Steve Stone's street fighting man, Junior Kennedy?
I do not.
Was he not on the team?
He must not have been an 81 Cub.
So how did I think that he was on the team the year before? Because I mentioned how going into the 82 season,
maybe he went on strike and never came back. He was mad.
I
don't think we got a fair deal.
Going into the 82 season,
Marvin,
long time
you got a lot of work
Red Philly. Junior Kennedy was going to be the everyday second baseman, and Pat Tabler, who was a young prospect that the Cubs have nabbed, maybe related to your observation about Steinbrenner just dealing prospects willy-nilly, was going to be the backup. And at the last minute, Dallas Green acquired Bump Wills, which basically rendered street fighting man Junior Kennedy as the backup and Pat Tabler in Des Moines. And Pat Tabler was pissed. But I thought that Junior Kennedy had actually. I thought that I was familiar with Junior Kennedy, that he had been on the 81 Cubs.
And he was an 82
Incredible. So it must have just been the reports from Mesa in spring training that got me familiar with Junior Kennedy.
The 4th second baseman, the Baseball Reference lists, is Scott Fletcher. That's why I said 2 of these guys are inextricably linked.
Scott Fletcher made his debut in 81.
Yes, because after the 82 season, Pat Tabler, Scott Fletcher, Randy Martz, and Dick Tidrow were traded from the Cubs to the White Sox.
Steve Trout and Warren Brewster?
Warren Brewster and Steve Trout.
All right. Since you brought it up, that's another chink in Dallas Green's armor. Maybe we'll save 84. 84, you talked about when he traded for Carter, or he traded for Sutcliffe, and that actually it was an early trade deadline, but it was also the guys that Green had dealt, Joe Cartamel, had not cleared waivers, and that we had to sweat it out until that. So Dallas Green wasn't perfect. And I'm going to say that that the same thing is a little bit applicable when it comes to that trade, because he was forced to make that trade right prior to the 83 season because Fergie Jenkins had come back. Dallas Green had signed him, and he had a nice season. He was slated to be the opening day starter in 83, Fergie was, and that somehow Green had fucked up and Fergie was not protected. And the rumor around town was that the White Sox were going to grab Fergie Jenkins because the Sox were actually kind of on a little bit of an ascension. They would win the division in 83. They were La Russa was their manager. They had some good young players. Harold Baines was actually playing a position and being productive. And I don't know how much they needed Fergie.
He was on his original heart and kidneys.
Right. Thank you. But somehow that deal was sort of seemed like Dallas Green was forced to make that trade. He was compromised so he could, that the Sox like kind of held him ransom for Fergie. Turned out to be a benefit because Steve Trout would be the number 2 starter in '84, and Warren Brewster, as much as we didn't care for him, was a member of the bullpen. And that flat Sam that the Cubs sent to the Sox, Tabler, the Sox gave up on Tabler. He'd have a nice little short career at Cleveland and be known as Mr. Grand Slam guy in the '80s. And then who'd you say, Fletcher? Randy Martz? Did you say Randy Martz?
Dick Tidrow.
And Dick Tidrow at the end of his career. So didn't really hurt Dallas Green, but I remember it was a kind of a black eye for Dallas Green that he carelessly left Fergie unprotected. The Sox.
Let me tell you why the Pat Tabler Scott Fletcher trade turned out to be a disaster for the White Sox.
Ooh, I'm here for this.
So that trade was in January, right before spring training,
of '83.
Yes, which works out the timing that you said. So at the end of spring training, Tony La Russa is looking over his roster and he's like, I don't have any room for Pat Tabler. We're gonna have to trade him. They traded him to the Indians for Jerry Dybzinski.
Oh my God!
His base running cost them the 1983 ALCS against the Orioles.
Ooh, hey, can we stick a pin in that and maybe do a deep dive on that when the wheel falls on 1983? I would have loved that. We have a lot to cover with '83, I guess, but that's for those of you not in the know. Jerry Dybzinski, if you're a diehard Sox fan that was cogent in 1983, it's kind of when we see Leon Durham in '84, Alex Gonzalez in 2003, just a player on your team that makes a mistake, and in his case, it was largely a mental mistake. These were back when LCS games our series were 3 out of 5, and the Sox were down 2-1 game. They would get eliminated, but it was a 0-0 game, late innings,
Rick
and he's
Burns
on first.
Pitching
his ass off. He went 10 innings, I think, until they gave up the homer to former and future Cardinal Tito Landrum. I think at one point Dybzinski was on first. The Sox bats were cold in that whole series, but they woke up in this like 6th or 7th inning. Dybzinski is on first, and somebody gets a hit to the gap, and Dybzinski rounds second, but he goes too far and gets hung up, and that was like the Sox best threat. Just one of those names that will live in infamy. So I never realized that the Sox had given up Pat Tabler, who then himself, so you can imagine an alternate history. Pat Tabler, I don't know if he was a heady player. I don't know, at least not dipshitty enough to get into that base running situation. But Pat Tabler would have a brief sort of a career, somewhat productive for the Indians, but he had this weird sort of anomalous statistical thing with his offensive production with the bases loaded. Which, of course, most hitters have good numbers with the bases loaded.
Not like this. So here's Pat Tabler's career numbers with the bases loaded. He batted 88 times with the bases loaded. This is almost unbelievable. In 88 at-bats with the bases loaded, he scored 80 runs.
Wait, what?
I mean, he had 109 plate appearances, but still 80 times. He came up 109 times with the bases loaded. He ended up scoring 80 of those times.
How does that factor? So you're not just looking at his at-bats. He scored 80.
That's what am I missing? 109 plate appearances, 80 runs, 43 hits, 6 doubles, 3 triples, 2 homers. In those 80 at-bats with the bases loaded, he drove in 108 runs.
So that tracks.
He walked 11 times with the bases loaded. So there's 11 of his 108 RBIs right there. He only struck out 9 times in 88 at-bats with the bases loaded.
Wow.
He slashed 489, 505, 693 for a career OPS with the bases loaded of 1.198. That's an OPS plus of 229. So it's not like he had a hot streak at some point in his career. He did it the whole
throughout
time.
The duration of his career. To close the book on Pat Tabler, did we see who the Cubs dealt to get him from the Yankees? It was around the time that they dealt Reuschel, but he was not involved in the Reuschel trade. You already covered that. I just remember when I brought this up in 1980 because he got called up. Did he call up in 80? Because Pat Tabler has come up as a Cub before 82. But I remember there was rumors for weeks that this prospect, because he was a pretty well-regarded prospect, that the Cubs were in the hunt to get Pat Tabler.
August 19th, it was that year. August 19th, 81. So all of his games were after the because he got picked up during the season that year. Oh, this was the Yankees going for it. The Yankees acquired Bill Caudle and Jay Howell.
Two of the aforementioned in previous podcast nondescript Cubs relief pitchers from this exact era who would go on to become, for at least for brief periods, dominant closers
and how about this?
In the majors.
Well, this is weird.
Because Bill Caudle would be an 84 All-Star for Oakland and signed a huge contract for the Blue Jays. He just, okay.
Well, so I don't understand the trade from the Yankee standpoint. Now that I read the dates. Because this is after the trade deadline.
And after they've resumed play.
Yes. I guess maybe they pushed it back. But the trade was Pat Tabler to the Cubs for two players we named later. That was the trade. Caudle went to the Yankees on April 1st, 82. And Howell went to the Yankees on August 2nd, 1982.
A whole year.
A year after the trade, they finally threw in the other body. It was Jay.
So the Yankees were not, in fact, going for it in 81. They just had to get rid of Pat Tabler, and they're planning. What an odd trade. They just
had to clear a 40-man spot or something weird because of other trades there. Because clearly,
the Yankees were going to the playoff, right? Yeah. So they didn't have room for Pat Tabler. They were forced to get rid of him.
And they didn't want anybody on there
for that season. They must have been
clear in roster space because they got two bodies, but they didn't want either one of them then.
I wonder how much of it is just related to any logistical sort of short-term circumstances that arose out of the strike. I don't know.
It's weird. You don't see that. Player demolators do not linger for.
Right. Well,
the longest one, didn't the Cubs? Wasn't Bobby Hill a player demolator, and they had to wait for a certain amount of time before they could actually send him? Wasn't that right?
You might be right.
The Pirates?
Yeah, the Mitch. That was was he part of the Aramis trade? Yes. There's some contractual.
Maybe I'm dreaming that, but I know it's happened where it's okay, we know this guy's getting traded, but he can't go yet. Just don't.
It's kind of that's kind of what Pat Tabler's situation was, because I just remember the Cubs were in the running. Somebody was going to get Pat Tabler, and it turned out to be the Cubs. So hey, that's a bright spot. That. Herman Frank's coming back to run the team. Other bright spot. Oh, Lee Smith, was on the 81 Cubs, so that's good. He was emerging. Suter was gone. I think Tidrow came into the season as the nominal closer. Again, they had no plan. They had no plan for a long-term manager. They had absolutely decrepit, but yeah, Tidrow would have been their starter.
So even though the season was two halves long,
starter.
Cubs still only use 15 pitchers in that.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kann du noch?
If you've heard that sound from Babbel before, I bet you do. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app that actually works. With quick 10-minute lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel gets you on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. With over 16 million subscriptions sold and a 20-day money-back guarantee, just start speaking another language with Babbel. Right now, up to 55% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/Spotify podcast. Spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify podcast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
They're starting the guys who made the most starts for them. I better double check.
Well, Kruko maybe our guy. Kruko is still in the 81 Cubs.
Yeah, Kruko made the most. The only one who made more than 14 starts was Mike Kruko. He's 9-9 with a 368. That's not bad for a bad team.
I think we've established Kruko as a better pitcher than I even remember.
Yeah. Reuschel was 4-7 in the 13 starts he made before he got traded. Doug Bird got traded for Reuschel, and he ended up making 12 starts. He went 4-5.
Okay.
Mike Griffin went 2-5. He made 9 starts and 7 relief appearances. The other guy who made... Randy Martz made 14 starts.
So Randy Martz was kind of like what we had to settle for as our pitching prospect. around this time.
Well,
Randy Martz.
Oh, there are a lot of guys got starts. Bill Caudle got 10 and Ken Kravick got 12.
So Ken Kravick had been traded for Dennis Lamp going into the season. I mentioned this before. I'll just quickly mention it again. As Cub fans, we thought we had owned the White Sox because we thought Ken Kravick was a really good Sox pitcher, and he may have been. And Dennis Lamp was just this guy whose mustache and eyebrows were so thick that he couldn't see even through his foggy glasses. And yet Dennis Lamp would go on to have a really nice, 1980s, and Ken Kravick was out of baseball in a year, and of course would come back as a Cubs front office guy. But I think he went 1-7 in 81. And who was the other guy? I'm sorry, you mentioned before Kravick that had starts on that team. I had a thought about him.
Yeah.
Besides Kravick. Yeah, so Caudle may have hit a double in 1981. I only remember this because this is what we do, random facts that may or may not be able to be verified. But there was a game when the shadows were creeping out, and I'm pretty sure it was 1981, but it could have been 1980. If so, I apologize. But Bill Caudle, relief pitcher, was batting, and he showed bunt and pulled the bat back and lined it over the third baseman's head. It was all we could talk about for days at a time. And then one more loose end, because you mentioned Scott Fletcher, I'm just going to mention that very exciting for 9-year-old Huey. Got to see Scott Fletcher's debut on television, not in person. Now, I mentioned before that we saw future Dodger manager Jim Tracy's debut in person at Wrigley Field, and how exciting it was because he wasn't in the program because that's how new he had been called up. And Jim Tracy may have gotten a hit or two, but not in his first at-bat. I just remember watching this game on TV in 81, and oh my God, here's this new guy, Scott Fletcher, and he got a hit in his first Major League plate appearance. Jack Brickhouse was going nuts. And since I'm on this tangent, I'm just going to say one more fun fact so I don't forget about it. Later this season, another player would get his first Major League hit at Wrigley Field in September, only it was a member of the Philadelphia Phillies, and his name was Ryan Sandberg.
Oh.
But that happened in 1981.
Was it Ryan D. Sandberg?
I don't know, but there's video of it because somebody posted a few months ago, and Leon Durham was in right field. I think it was the second game of a doubleheader or something. Sandberg was called up in 81 by the Phillies as a shortstop. He went 1 for 9. Dallas Green, of course, was still the Phillies manager. Andy, that glove looks perfect, by the way. That's Andy's right. For those of you, nobody can see this, but
nobody
Andy's
can see that I've been reunited with
the Rawlings,
with the glove of my youth, the Ryan Sandberg Rawlings fastback.
Yep.
Which is not mine though. I found it on eBay, the exact model that I had, and I bought it, and the thing is like in mint condition. I feel bad. Some kid never used this. Clearly,
even through the Google view, even through the Zoom or whatever, that looks like it's a quality glove. You can play ball with that.
Good. I'm going to join a league just to use my glove. Got to be a men's.
But yeah, Ryan Sandberg made his debut like 81. It really, the expression, it's always darkest before the dawn, probably applies because, there were some. It was such a nadir, but there were some signs. Maybe Leon Durham was on the Cubs, Lee Smith was on the Cubs, Sandberg graced his presence. There'd be shitbags like Scott Fletcher would not be on the '84 Cubs. Things would turn, but there was a whole lot of shit to pile through.
Do you know who else made his Wrigley Field debut on August 15th, 1981?
August 15th, 1981. Mel Hall?
No. Me.
Your first game.
The first game I ever went to was just a beauty. I don't know how we got tickets.
It was it was the second week after the strike ended. There was probably a rush of people.
The 17-40 Cubs hosting 17-40 hosting the 26-27 Pittsburgh Pirates. My brother, my dad, and my grandpa, my mom's dad. So the 4 of us and 15,384 other people
on a Saturday
in August.
Can you repeat that attendance, Andy?
15,388.
In case we needed further accentuation as to the sort of historic nadir that the Cubs were probably, even by lower attendance standards in 1981, the fact that a day game in August against a team that had won the World Series still had probably Dave Park and Willie Stargell. Couldn't even couldn't even draw 16,000 to Wrigley Field. That's pretty fucking bad.
Well, how about this? Tonight's attendance, as we're recording this, tonight's attendance in Oakland was, Bob Nightingale just reported, it's got to be right, 2,703. It's the lowest Major League Baseball attendance, except for the time the Orioles weren't allowed to have fans.
After
Since
the
1980.
Freddie, oh my God, Freddie Gramer. Oh, wow.
2,703. They had 3,400 last night.
Wait, I remember a Sox game when the 1997 season was ice-ass cold, and the Sox had an opener that had 934. We can circle back to that.
Well, it was Bob. Maybe he just meant it was Oakland's lowest.
I think if you Google 1997 Whites, it might not even been opening day, but it was a game in April.
Rookie league teams will have more than 27
yes.
people.
The Sox literally had, and this was in the modern era when they counted tickets sold, but there was a game, I know it was under 1,000 tickets sold for a White Sox game. It was so fucking cold in April of 97.
Okay,
Sorry,
so here's what we did. We got a hold of these hot tickets somehow. I don't know how we did it. It was great. There was no StubHub back then.
You're talking about August 15th, 1981. Yeah. There was no StubHub, but there was a Ticketron.
No, maybe that's what we did. I don't know. But we somehow got our hands on these in-demand tickets. And we hopped in the, I believe we were driving a lovely brown Ford LTD at the time. We all piled in the LTD, including my mom. And we drove down 90, and we stopped at the Woodfield Mall and let her out. Mom was going to go shopping while we went to see the Cubs.
Yeah, and the Pirates maybe at this point.
Yeah. And we hopped back in the car and we drove down to Wrigley, and we got there and we got to see, the starting lineup for the Pirates. They still had a fair amount of 79 Pirates. Omar Moreno in center field. Tim Foley was the shortstop. Dave Parker.
Yep.
The Cobra was in
all
right
79
field.
Pirates. Rod Skurt. Yep. Mike Easler was a 79. I'm pretty sure it was a 79.
Yes,
so was John Milner.
Mike Easler,
Phil
John
Garner.
Milner.
These are all 79 Pirates.
Dale Barra.
Not Tony Pena though. He was their new catcher. Ed Ott and yeah. Okay, but still, this is still
Jim Bibby
team
was pitching for the Pirates against the Cubs. Oh, what a great lineup they had. Ivan DeJesus at shortstop. Steve Henderson in left. Bill Buckner at first. Bobby Bonds in center. Hector Cruz in right. Jody Davis, the catcher. Ken Reitz at third. Steve Dillard played second. And hey, what do you know? Mike Krukow was the starting pitcher. First game I ever saw. One of my favorite announcers. So we settled in to watch this exciting game while Mom was running around the mall, spending money that Dad didn't have. And things got off to a promising start. The Cubs scored first, the bottom of the second. Kenny Reitz doubled in Hector Cruz. The Cubs were up 1-0.
Cruz.
Pirates would tie it on a Tim Foley single that scored Omar Moreno.
By the way, Tim Foley, another one of those countless shortstops of this era that absolutely had a wet newspaper for a bat. Just pointing that out. Sorry. Go on.
So at some point early in the game, we were sitting we were sitting a few rows back of the Pirates. No, it would have been the Cubs bullpen, right?
Was it opposite?
Been on the third base side, right? Or
well, the Cubs the home team dugout is usually third base, but for some years they would switch it where the bullpen be across the diamond, I think. Or maybe
so they could see them easier?
I don't know. Yeah, right.
But anyway, so we were sitting behind one of the bullpens. That's not the important part, but
that doesn't sound right, though.
Mike Easler was the left fielder, so we were pretty close to him. And there were some guys sitting behind us who were smoking something funny.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And,
first place to ever smell ganja was in the bleachers at Wrigley, FYI.
And Easler was playing catch with. I would guess it was the Pirates dugout. Because who knows? I was 8. I don't remember. I seem to remember that he was being intrigued by the fact that he was playing catch with somebody in the bullpen. So that would have been the Pirates bullpen then, right? Because he was playing catch with a Cub, while Omar Moreno and Dave Parker were playing catch by themselves on the other half of the outfield. And Easler dropped an easy throw from this guy.
You got heckled?
And our friends behind us kept calling him Hands. First they were calling him Hands Easler. Then they changed to Hands Easley. So for the rest of the game, he was hands easily. I don't know why, because maybe Kenny Easley. I don't know. For the rest, the rest of my life, he's always been hands easily to me. He's never been Mike Easler. So we had that going for us, which was fun.
Which is nice.
But tied at 1 in the 6th, and Ty Waller pinch hit for Ken Reitz, even though Reitz had already driven in the only run. But it was a savvy move by Joey Amalfitano because
Ty Waller, at 1982 opening day center fielder.
He had a sac fly to Omar Moreno, scored Bill Buckner. The throw went awry, and Bobby Bonds scored. So the Cubs were up 3-1.
And real quick, since you brought him up, not to interrupt the game, but I like the flow of this, but Bobby Bonds was his last major league stop. Of course, a 9-year-old Huey had no idea about Barry Bonds. Bobby himself was a bit of a well-known player by kind of being a high strikeout Willie Mays type. He hit 30 homers, 30 steals, and a shitload of strikeouts for his time. Very exciting, kind of all five-tool player. But 1981, he was an old man, but he was fun. He was like one of these guys. I remember being this slapdash team that they put together. We've got Bobby Bonds that my dad would tell me about. Hit a lot of homers and stole a lot of bases in the 70s. Here he is against his son's future team, helping to tie the game up.
So Cubs are up 3-1 going into the top of the 8th. In the bottom of the 7th, Mike Lum had pinch hit for Kruko. So Bill Caudle came out to pitch the 8th. Steve Nicosia. He singled the lead off the inning. Line drive to right field out there to Leon Durham. And Omar Moreno, he grounded out. Nicosia went to second. So runner at second, 1 out. Tim Foley grounded out to the pitcher. And Nicosia must not have advanced.
He's a catcher, so
runner at second.
Scared.
And 2 outs. And Joey goes to Doug Capilla. He comes in to face Dave Parker.
Yeah, Doug Capilla was a left-hander. He's a tiny Hawaiian-looking guy with a thin mustache.
And he gave up a single to Dave Parker to make it 3-2. With Mike with hands easily up, Parker stole second base, and then easily singled to tie the game. It was a ground ball to shortstop.
Ivan couldn't do it. Slow roller.
Parker scored, and then Easler was out trying to go to second. I can't imagine what happened. All that happened.
Maybe, I think maybe a botched rundown is hitting the hole, and then what's his name rounded third too much. Sounds way too heady of a play for the 81 Cubs to have pulled off. Throw behind the runner, but somehow botch it. But that sounds like the 81 Cubs. He scores, but they still manage to get Easler. Who knows?
So now we're tied. Go to the bottom of the 8th. Kent Tekulve has come in to pitch for the Pirates. Cubs do not score.
Kent Tekulve always scared us because even though he was like 68 pounds, he looked like a scarecrow and he wore sunglasses. It looked like the warden in Cool Hand Luke, kind of, maybe.
With 2 outs, Waller singled and stole second, and then Steve Dillard walked. So Mike Tyson, who pinch hit for Doug Capilla, had a chance with 2 on and 2 outs, but he popped out to left field.
Damn you, Mike Tyson.
Lee Arthur Smith came in to pitch the top of the 9th.
Very young Lee Arthur Smith.
And he pitched around a 1-out single to Phil Garner, scrap iron. And so we went to the bottom of the 9th, and here's how this started. Kent Tekulve still in. DeJesus singles to left. Steve Henderson bunts, and he's safe, and so is DeJesus. So runners first and second, and nobody out. Bill Buckner's up. Well, Billy Buck is going to get a walk-off. We don't even know it was a walk-off at the time.
He's in the midst of probably his best season as a Cub. He's a defending NL champion, batting champion.
Yeah, it started out with 15,000 fans. We're probably down to about 8,000 now. We're all up. We're cheering. We're excited. And Ivan DeJesus gets picked off second base. Oof. So now there's 1 out with a runner at first. Buck flies out to right. But Steve Henderson steals second. So Bobby Bonds is up. He can single and win the game, but he pops out to second base. So now about this time, Dad is starting to get nervous because now we're going to extra innings. He left
your mom! I forgot all about your mom at Woodfield.
He left Mom in the mall. This was back in the days when malls, or at least a lot of the stores, closed at 5 o'clock on Saturdays.
Especially in August, everyone's outside. They're not doing. They do business at cold weather.
So a 120 game. He's probably thinking we could probably hang on for another inning.
Maybe the Orange Bowl is still open. She can get a sherbet. I don't know.
Right. But I think mostly he's thinking she's got lots of checks. We don't have a lot of money, but she's got lots of checks, and I probably don't want to leave her in there much longer.
That's the other concern. So it's a race against the clock.
So he's getting nervous, but it's like, don't worry. The Cubs are terrible. They're going to blow it. We'll be out of here in no time.
Right. This is a historically bad team. Let's get it over with.
In the top of the 10th, with 2 outs, Omar Moreno singles, steals second base. Everybody was running all over Jody and Tony Pena, apparently. Tim Foley walks, so his runner is a first and second with 2 outs for Dave Parker. He grounds out to Buckner, so we're going to the bottom of the 10th. Jerry Morales leads off the bottom of the 10th.
A few more fans leave. The Dolans are still in their seats.
Jerry Morales leads off with a single. He gets the great Bill Robinson, who pitched forever.
No, Bill Robinson?
Yeah, Bill Robinson.
The first baseman used to be a Mets coach in '84.
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking of the wrong. I was thinking of the other guy.
Don Robinson.
Odell Jones replaced Bill Robinson. You're right.
Yeah, Don Robinson was the pitcher. Bill Robinson almost got into a fight with some of the very fans hanging out behind the dugout as a Mets coach in '84, but he was still playing for the Pirates in '81. All right.
So Odell Jones is in. Jerry Morales is off with a single. Jody bunts him to second. They intentionally walk Ty Waller. So here's Steve Dillard. Of course. 2 on and 1 out.
Oh, what an insult to my guy, Steve Dillard. He walked Ty Waller in front of him.
He pops out to the first baseman. Tim Blackwell pinch hits for Lee Smith.
And his handlebar mustache.
And he strikes out.
Oh, he sucked.
So Mike Griffin comes in to pitch for the Cubs.
Former Yankee.
And he gets Easler, Milner, and Garner 1, 2, 3.
Wow.
Bottom of the 11th. Odell Jones is still in. He strikes out to Jesus and Henderson, and then Buckner grounds out to the pitcher. So at least things are going fast because we're still there.
As far as we know.
No, I know because I know when we left. We get to the 12th. And with 2 outs, Nicosia singles, Omar Moreno singles, Tim Foley singles, but of course Nicosia can't score. So the bases are loaded with 2 outs. Dave Parker's up, and he grounds out to second base.
Okay. Cobra, not feeling up for it.
So Rod Scurry comes in a pitch, bottom of the 12th. He gets Bonds. He strikes out Bonds and Morales. Jody pops out to first. The Pirates come up in the top of the 13th. We're still there. We're getting ready. Dad's getting antsy, but we're still there.
Sun's starting. We've talked about suspended games before.
About that. There's no lights.
Shadows are out there.
Easler and Milner ground out. Phil Garner walks. Mike Griffin balks Dale Barrett, or balks with Barrett batting, so Garner goes to second. Randy Martz comes in. He ends up walking Barrett, and Lee Lacey's up, but he flies out. So now we're going to the bottom of the 13th. Rod Scurry's still in. He strikes out Waller and Dillard. Randy Martz has to bat for himself, which I think was probably the end of it for Dad.
Well, yeah. At this point, Marshall Fields is closed at Woodfield, but Sears is still open. So,
she's looking at white walls and washer dryers. Randy Martz pops out to the catcher, and I would guess we stuck around. I think we stuck around for the 14th.
Are you saying you didn't stick around for the thrilling finish?
So Randy Martz still pitching, obviously. He stayed in to hit. He better be pitching. And Nicosia flies out. Omar Moreno singles. Tim Foley walks.
I see where you're headed. I'm looking ahead here. Yeah. This is good. There's a story here I can tell.
Rod Scurry flies out. And then Mike Easler comes up with another chance, with a chance to give them the lead. He grounds out to the pitcher. Now we're going to the bottom of the 14th. And I'm positive at this point, Dad is like, all right, if they don't score here, we've got to go.
Right, and this is either your first game or the first game you remember. Either way, this is your first memory of being in a Cubs game.
First Cub game I ever went to. Because we've told this story before.
It's going on and on and on.
Yes.
Are you bored, by the way? I know your dad's anxious because your mom's,
I don't know. I would think by now. I mean, this game lasts almost 5 hours. I can't imagine I was raptured. Although there was lots of I'm sure I got excited every time one team or the other got close to scoring, which happened a bunch in extra innings. They just didn't ever do it.
This is a low-scoring game, though. Otherwise, it turns out.
But don't worry about it. It's about on the 14th, and here come the Cubs. Rod Scurry in his ninth inning of relief. DeJesus singles. You're like, oh, we're in great shape. Oh, he tries to stretch it to a double. He's out.
Omar Moreno throws him out. Jesus Christ.
1 out. Steve Henderson walks. Bill Buckner singles. Henderson goes to third. So that actually, had Ivan DeJesus simply stayed on first base, the Cubs win. Instead, there's runners at first and third, and there's 1 out for Bobby Bonds. He hits a grounder to third. Steve Henderson's coming home
for the winning run.
Yes, and he's out. Buckner's on second. Jerry Morales with 2 on and 2 outs.
There was Dale Berra, by the way, with the assist.
Oh yeah, the heady Dale Berra with a nose full of coke.
Right, to a catcher that wasn't his dad.
So Dad's like, all right, we gotta go. Pack your shit up. They're gonna play forever.
Right.
We gotta go. We gotta pick up your ma. So we trundle out. It doesn't take too long to get to the car because it's 1981.
Well, it's a day game, right? You're probably parked right at Waveland and Clark, basically, or
we had 2 wheels up on the curb right by the marquee for the entire game.
Right, exactly.
Randy Mart's still pitching for the Cubs. The Pirates go down 1, 2, 3.
Randy Martz, he's showing some stuff for the future, guys. We're getting excited here. Holding on.
And poor Rod Scurry still in for the Pirates. We can hear the crowd, what's left of the crowd in quotes, but we can hear people getting excited in Wrigley. Jody Davis has led off with a single. Ty Waller has singled. Jody, of course, goes to second because he can't make it all the way to third. And I remember this, at least I've been told this. We open the doors on the car. Dad starts the car. And we hear Vince Lloyd as Steve Dillard hits a ground ball to Phil Garner at second base. And Phil throws it away. And Jody Davis comes around to score the winning run. And so the first Cub game I ever went to, I didn't get to stick around for the very end, and they won. But I got to kind of hear it. I got to hear Vince talk about it. And we could hear the last 400 people go, yay!
Well, and there's still excitement. You're in the car, and you're like, all right, we're out of there. It was a great day. You didn't see it, but you were still there. Eerily similar to not necessarily my first game, but the first game I remember the year before when Bill Russell threw away a ball, which would have been a little bit different because it was a lead-changing situation. But, yeah, kind of a thrilling finish. Another thing that both of our first games had in common, really shitty Cubs teams that both pulled off a walk-off win against a team that had won the World Series 2 years prior. How about that?
There you go.
Yeah. That's I'm sure what a lot of our listeners are coming here for. Some oddball facts like that.
I would guess that was the loss that broke the Pirates' spirit.
Yep.
Because that dropped them below 500 to 26 and 27.
Much like the 86 Cubs, I think the 81 Pirates were just Willie Stargell did not even get into this game, but I'm pretty sure he was rostered. He might have just disappeared at some point during that season. They were a shell of what remains their last World Series championship. So, I wanted to just, if we could, I don't know how much we've gone here, if we've wasted another 90 minutes on a shitty team, but you mentioned Vince Lloyd and then the broadcast, and I give me some thought to it today because we've covered 80 and 82. So what happens between 80 and 82 is 81 is the final season of Jack Brickhouse, and I don't know how much we actually dove into this. We've made allusions to the dynamics in play in the Cubs broadcast booth, but a lot of our experience isn't just the team, but it's also the people that tell us about the team and the play-by-play guys. And so, in 81, this is the 40th year of Jack Brickhouse. And you're talking about a Pirates game, of course. Milo Hamilton, I believe, was the Pirates broadcaster through their '79 World Series championship team. I'm pretty sure, and the Cubs hired him ostensibly to basically succeed Jack Brickhouse. Milo himself had, been this weird baseball play-by-play lifer for 20 or 30 years. I don't know. He'd done Braves games maybe, but definitely he was coming off of the Pirates, coincidentally enough. And nothing was in writing, of course. And, of course, the fact that the Tribune Company hired Milo and that things would pretty much change by the time Brickhouse actually retired. The gentleman's understanding was that when Jack Brickhouse would ride off into his golden shower sunset and, be a hero and disappear, that Milo would step in and secure his own Hall of Fame credentials and get to do the Cubs or what on this kind of nascent new superstation that they have and bouncing back and forth between the radio. He was going to be the guy. And so I think the arrangement typically was in 81 is that Milo and Jack both did the color. I don't think there was like a color guy in the broadcast booth, but then Jack would go over to the radio and Milo would do play-by-play. Lou Boudreaux might come over, but it was all set up, and this sort of stale Tribune ownership that was in place was pretty much not going to stand in the way. Jack Brickhouse is going to retire. Milo is going to be the guy. And then a couple things happen. Number one, the Wrigley family sells the Cubs to the Tribune Company midway through the 81 season. So they don't quite necessarily have the same agenda. But another thing that happened was that the White Sox, who had themselves been acquired, I believe for the third time when Bill Veeck was forced to sell the team, but he sold it to these two guys, not from Chicago, but had plenty of interest in owning a team. One was Jerry Reinsdorf, of course, who we all know too well today. The other was Eddie Einhorn. And really, what I remember in the early days of this new White Sox ownership was Eddie Einhorn was more of the face of the White Sox than Reinsdorf. It wasn't until years later that Reinsdorf sort of assumed more dominant control. But Reinsdorf was a real estate guy that just made a lot of money, whatever ventures he had. Eddie Einhorn was a cable TV guy. Like one of early innovations was broadcasting the epic Houston Cougars UCLA Bruins match between Elvin Hayes and Lou Alcindor that was on some sort of a cable television thing, and he was like, read some article about that like not too long ago where Einhorn's like still selling ads as the game is going on because it was an epic game, and he was one of these sports TV pioneers. But he was really the face. That's where he made his money. But he was really the face of the White Sox when they first bought the team. And one of their first moves, and this is the second thing, independent of the Tribune Company buying the Cubs and just changing, the stability, was that Eddie Einhorn, one of their plans was to take the Sox into private cable broadcasting. Up until that point, the Cubs, of course, had been on WGN forever. They're on Channel 9 TV. They're on WGN radio. The cable television was expanding. The Cubs were very well situated. The White Sox, though, they were on VHF. They were on Channel 44 in Chicago. You probably couldn't get a White Sox game in Rockford growing up. It was it was only a 6-county region around the Chicagoland, and it was on VHF. And probably not even all their games were even broadcast, I think. I mean, I couldn't tell you from experience because I was so young, but it was around the time that, we had some sort of a pre-configured taste of cable in Chicago with what was called On TV, which basically took over Channel 44, WSNS, which the Sox were broadcast on, kind of forced the Sox off of that. So I think in the 81 season, Harry Carey and crew and Jimmy Pearsall were doing a lot of games on WGN. They were actually sharing time, which was kind of odd because the Sox are usually independent of the Cubs. But while that was getting worked out in the 81 season, Eddie Einhorn and Jerry Reinsdorf configured a whole cable sports conglomerate, including the other sports franchises in Chicago, the Bulls and the Blackhawks, to put the games on cable television. And in doing so, and maybe this is just a narrative, or maybe there's a convenience, or maybe Harry was just being strategic, but it allowed for the opportunity for Harry Carey, who had been doing White Sox games on Channel 44 for 10 years, to really endear himself as being a man of the people and stand up to this sort of money grab and say, that's ridiculous. You're putting games on pay cable. This is bullshit. Harry made a lot of noise. Suddenly an opportunity is created. And regardless of what the Wrigley family may or may not have promised Milo Hamilton, this situation sort of opened up where after the 81 season, when Jack Brickhouse steps away, Milo Hamilton steps forward and falls through a hole and is replaced essentially by Harry Carey. And I just think it's funny. We could talk about it more when we discuss 83, 84. They actually had to work together for 3 seasons, but it's really an interesting thing that Milo Hamilton in the 81 Cubs season, from a fan's perspective, watching all of these games on WGN TV, is basically the heir apparent to Jack Brickhouse, and how things would change about 6 months after that.
So would you like to hear the peripatetic career of Milo Hamilton, baseball?
Let's listen to it. Let's listen to it live.
He got his first MLB job in 1953, announcing for the St. Louis Browns.
So he's about as old as Harry. Whoa, he goes back to Harry. There's an origin story. Better. Harry's across town.
Well, they work together because...
Or no, I'm in the same ballpark, actually. I'm sorry.
When the Browns left for Baltimore, Milo didn't go. Instead, he moved to the Cardinals, where he worked with Harry Carey and Jack Buck during the 1954 season.
Okay.
However, he was let go that year after the 54 season because they wanted to open a spot for Joe Garagiola. We can't argue with that.
Former player, St. Louis native. Yeah.
So where do you think Milo went next? He went to the Cubs.
That's right.
Jack Brickhouse and Vince Lloyd. And after 3 years, he was let go because PK hired Lou Boudreau.
Okay.
So
wow,
Milo,
I forgot about that.
Milo the cockroach, as he was, he didn't leave Chicago. He worked with Bob Elson with the White Sox for 1 season.
Okay.
No, actually for more than 1 season. Because in 1966, the Braves moved to Atlanta, and Milo got hired to be their play-by-play announcer.
That's where he finally got some stability.
And he worked with
for himself.
Ernie Johnson Sr., and everybody knows Ernie Johnson Jr. because he hosted.
I remember Ernie Johnson Sr.
Yep.
Because I'm old.
Oh yeah, he was doing TBS games when we were kids.
And he may have been around the Hank Aaron home run off of Al Downing, I'm guessing. But did he not go to the Pirates, or is that a miss?
No. He's going to get there. We got a lot of moves still from Milo.
Okay, but he joins the Braves in Atlanta or Milwaukee.
No, he goes to Atlanta. He never worked in Milwaukee. When they went to Atlanta, he went. He was their first announcer in Atlanta.
Okay. Making a name for himself.
Yeah, and he very famously, he probably has the most famous call of Aaron's 715th home run. Because
Scully has a call of it because
right.
he was the visiting broadcaster.
Right. He's sitting on 714, and then the next pitch, it's gone.
Good for Milo. At what point does past and future nemesis Harry Carey's son Skip join him in the Atlanta Braves booth? I'm wondering. Because Harry's son was doing games by the mid-'70s for the Braves, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah. I wonder what Skip... here it goes. Let's see. The Braves did not draw good attendance from 71 to 75 with several poor to mediocre seasons. Milo criticized poor attendance on the air. And Braves owners fired him after the 1975 season. Shortly thereafter, the team was sold to Ted Turner, who made the Braves a national phenomenon.
Wow!
With Hamilton's replacements,
he's
Skip
missing
Terry
2
and Pete Van Weer.
Oh my God! I cannot even wrap my brain around the fact that Milo missed 2 Superstation buses as they were boarding.
Meanwhile, in St. Louis, Jack Buck had agreed he was leaving the Cardinals for NBC to host a show called Grandstand.
So it's This Week in Baseball.
And Milo pulled out when he found out that Buck had it written into his contract that he could return to the Cardinals at any time if Grandstand failed, which it did. So Milo instead took a job with the Pirates in 1976, succeeding Bob Prince. He was not popular in Pittsburgh because the fans missed Bob Prince, and Milo's a prick.
This is great. This is just great.
But he was there through 79.
Yep.
And
so he got the broadcast. I don't know if it was on TV or radio, or if he was in the radio booth during the Orioles World Series. But yeah, he did get himself a World Series team Before being
this is what it says. Unhappy in Pittsburgh, Milo jumped at a chance to return to Chicago in 1980 to join the Cubs broadcast team alongside Brickhouse, Lloyd, and Boudreau. He was under the impression he was heir apparent to Brickhouse upon the latter's retirement. Instead, he later said he had been guaranteed in blood that he would replace Brickhouse on Cubs television broadcast in 1982. As we know,
blood?
That blood ended up not counting because Harry Carey came.
Wow.
Milo's contract ran out in 1984, and he was not renewed, and Milo blamed Harry. Whatever. They didn't need you. They had full booths. They didn't need you.
Well, the thing is, I'm still blown away, and we lived through it, but they worked together, because I remember hearing, like, there'd be confrontations when, like, Harry would, because at one point, I think they changed it up where Milo went to the radio. I can't figure out how it all worked, but, like, supposedly there were a couple of confrontations on the catwalk between Booth and stuff, but they actually worked together for 3 seasons, and it's just, Harry didn't give a shit, It's like... I feel like there's a screenplay that you could write about Milo Hamilton, like always running into these dead ends or these fateful, like, crossroads. Just the whole being outspoken with a shitty Braves team, and then right before Ted Turner makes them a national brand. And then he has another chance at maybe being nationally known on WGN when things are taking off there.
Yeah, and then... he misses out on one superstation and then basically is shoved off the other one by Harry.
But it also sounds like he's like a lot of these steps. It's not like he's Job from the Bible. It's not like he's this poor, suffering, innocent fool. Like, sounds like he's an asshole. Like he's some of these problems are a little bit self-generated.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I always thought, even as a kid, that Milo was a prick.
Holy Toledo! That's the Milo Hamilton call. And then he also did a advertisement for True Link Fence where he had his yellow WGN blazer on, and he's like, they show a clip from a Cubs game in which somebody hit one onto Waveland, and he'd point out that's a True Link fence. Apparently, True Link had the fences in Wrigley Field.
Yeah. Milo told, and after he left the Cubs, he told the writer Kurt Smith that officials at WGN spent an hour praising him, but told him they had to dismiss him because Harry didn't like him, and Harry was more important to the Cubs.
Well, but he went to Houston after that, and the Cubs got Dwayne Statz, who I think we always enjoyed Dwayne. Yeah. He was the nice, great call.
Dwayne left to go to the Yankees, which seemed like a great job. And then Steinbrenner decided he didn't like him, and so he wasn't there for very long. But then he's been in Tampa forever. He's still there.
Still is. The sad part about Dwayne leaving, by the way, we could revisit it, was that it rendered us Tom Brenneman as a Cubs announcer. But it went Milo Hamilton, Dwayne Statz, Tom Brenneman. But Milo went to Houston. He kind of swapped with Dwayne, I think, and he did actually get into the Hall of Fame, even though he really had to labor and suffer a lot of indignities through the years.
Milo went to Houston in 85. He became their primary announcer in 87, and he held that job until his retirement in 2012. And he won the Ford Frick Award in 1992, which they give that award to people that don't deserve it, like Hawk Harrelson. So,
yeah.
What I remember about Milo was that he gave the time a lot, and he continued to do it even in Houston when it's like, okay, buddy, everybody, if you're in your car, everybody can see the time in their car now. This isn't 1964.
Right.
You don't have to tell us that it's 2:15. We know what time it is. Just stop it. So that's one of the things I remember about.
And I forget that he really was a contemporary of Harry's. He goes back. I mean, God, he had this earlier life briefly in the Cubs universe of P.K. Wrigley in the 50s.
Yeah, he was born in 1927.
God, he really was old.
Harry was born in 1914.
Yeah, so Harry is a bit older.
It's funny. Nobody really knows how old. Harry's birth year was always in dispute.
Because he was an orphan. Mm-hmm. Harry Carabina. I love that. I love the added measure of Skip Carey, who was nothing special as a play-by-play guy, but whatever, like benefits from the TBS. That totally could have been Milo if he didn't have a big fucking mouth and have to shit on the fans. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember how the rotation worked either, because in my mind it was always Vince and Lou did. Lou did all 9 innings on radio. Vince did the middle 3 on TV.
Vince would come over, right?
Yeah. So it must have been when Milo was there. Milo must have lurked in the radio booth, and then he did TV in the middle 3 when Milo was there.
I think because when we did the '82 season, you found a link. Casey Ignarski had procured the home opener that year against the Mets when Bill Buckner hit a homer. That's
and that one's different because there's no Steve yet.
Correct.
That's what complicated
That's
it.
right. That's right. So
Steve
came in '83.
You had an analyst on both because Lou and
that's right.
Lou used to come over and do the middle 3.
So I think what they did in '82 was that Harry and Milo actually did innings 1 through 3 and 7 through 9, and Milo stayed on TV the whole time and would do with Lou in the middle innings.
That's what I think they did.
I'm going to say one thing now, just
Steve
to wrap this up, because I remember this in 1981. And I take my word for it or don't. But, and this is probably because of the flux that was going on, but Lou Brock, future Cardinal Hall of Famer, a former Cardinal player, obviously former Cub farmhand, was trying to break into broadcasting. And the Cubs gave him a shot during the '81 season. So Lou Brock did a handful of Cubs games, I guarantee you. And I just remember, as politely as my dad could say, I just can't understand what Lou's saying. He just was not very he just had a difficult time enunciating, and it just didn't really make for a very professional broadcast. So I do know that they really wanted to give Lou Brock a shot at getting that job, and they had plenty of opportunity. And maybe between during the strike between the 2 portion schedules, they were trying to talk him up. And I do remember that Lou Brock was in the booth quite a bit, probably obviously with Milo or Jack, I don't know, but he was some semblance of a color man. But you're right. In '82, they didn't have a Steve Stone. Harry did 1 year without him, and then Stone joins in '83. They still had Milo. And I think Milo, somehow they forced Vince Lloyd out. It was never really the same from year to year until once Dwayne Stats got in. Then for a while, it was then the formula was set. That Dwayne,
you understood it. It was
Dwayne would start on the radio and come over. Dwayne, but it wasn't always like that prior to then.
Yeah, and the middle 3 were always when Steve would work in his tortured puns on people's names, like his long story about Lance McCullers. He told a story about this coat that had been in the McCullers family forever, and he went on and on and on, and the payoff was it was the coat of many McCullers.
Right.
And Dwayne just groaned, the appropriate. Right. And then Arnie started doing his lake shots.
You see the clock at the Waveland golf course and stuff. It would show you could see the boats out there. You see the clock tower at the Waveland golf course,
right?
Or water shots, not headshots.
Headshots and other things that they would shoot.
That was more of a Harry production. Harry and Arnie production.
All right. Well, I think that's about all we can squeeze out of the 81 Cup.
It's a lot of shit to squeeze in one sock. I think, I don't think we left anything, any stone unturned there.
Nope.
And if we did, I apologize.
All right.
But, end of an era. Dallas Green comes in. That's it. So we close the chapter on a really dark point. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah. The strike came just in time. Gave Cub fans 2 months off in the middle of a terrible season.
13 years before history would repeat itself. Yes.
All right. All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Andy. Look forward to the next one.
Many of us have herpes.